right, Mo, we're live. Thanks for joining me on the show. As I typically do, I'm going to give the floor to you. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give a brief background about who you are, what you do, what you're building.
Hey man, thanks for having me. So I'm Mo Hallaba. I'm the CEO of Datawisp. We're an AI data analytics company trying to make data more accessible for everyone. Um, my background, it was originally in finance. I spent 10 years doing different roles from equity research to corporate M&A, buying and selling financial assets, and then eventually decided that I wanted to do something entrepreneurial and left banking to start my own gaming startup. At the same time, I started like a networking group for gaming professionals, and my startup didn't work out, but I ended up meeting, my current co-founders through that, and so kind of took a weird detour into esports and advised an esports team for a while that was really into data and analytics, and that's kind of how I got into that. And so we built these cool tools and ended up spinning them out and selling them to other teams and broadcasters and stuff, and then eventually ended up building Datawisp to make it not just a gaming thing, but accessible to everyone. So a bit of a strange journey, but happy to talk about all that stuff.
Yeah. So let's unpack it a bit. I'm just kind of curious. So maybe even back to college, like has your history always been in data analytics, or I'm just curious how you went from banking into this running CEO of an AI data analytics company. It seems like, it's kind of a stretch. Like how do you pull that off? How do you develop the skills to be able to
Yeah.
do that and be confident that you can be successful in it?
So, not at all to answer your question. So, like, I never was never really into data or analytics or anything. The closest thing I studied in college was statistics, and I think it was one of the worst grades I ever got in any class. I think I got a 25 on the final exam out of 100. Definitely not my forte. But there's a few things, in startups that are very often overlooked. Like people always think about having like a groundbreaking idea. People always think about like being very smart or being a good programmer or whatever. And if you talk to like really successful founders of like billion-dollar companies, there's always one thing that comes back. It's like, yeah, you have to have a good idea. Yeah, you have to have a good team. But like perseverance and like work ethic are like the two most important things when it comes to building a successful startup, like not giving up and just working harder than everyone else. And I think when you spend 10 years working on Wall Street, you develop some of those skills. So in that regard, like, getting up early, working really late, grinding is 7 days a week was kind of like not foreign to me because I'd already been doing that. And so when I started working for myself, like on my own startup, I found myself working longer hours than I was when I was in banking somehow. Um, so I'd say a lot of people like underestimate how much of startups is just like hard work. Um,
And so can we maybe unpack what it's like to work on Wall Street and if you're
yeah,
able to share like who you work for and maybe just give me like a day in the
yeah.
life, like
So I worked for a few different banks, and this is like obviously like Wall Street has changed a lot since then. My first day on the job was like literally the peak of the stock market in summer 2007. So like my first day was when it reached the highest point ever, and then like shortly after that, I remember I did my training, and then by the time I finished my training, I was like started with my team, and then my boss downgraded all like every single one of the 29 banks that we covered, and then it was just financial crisis and everything just went off a cliff. So that was my experience getting into it. So obviously like I'd get in around 8 and go home at like 2 in the morning some days just because there was just like so much happening and we were like research analysts. So our job was kind of to keep everyone else informed of what was happening. And so that was that. And then eventually moved into like corporate A. And so sometimes you're working on deals and you have like short deadlines for presentations and things. And again, it's just like, hey, I need this by Monday morning, and you get a bunch of stuff dropped on your desk Friday afternoon. And so that whole weekend is just crunching numbers and making PowerPoint slides. Um, So I kind of got used to that. That's changed to some degree because they realized that, hey, burning out all your employees isn't great. So they
Hmm.
started putting like restrictions on how many weekends people can work and things like that. And you have to get like approval from HR if you want someone to work on a Saturday now, I think. But that was my experience. So going into startups, I mean, now I'm just kind of like used to it.
So would you say like maybe on average finance you're working like 60 to 80-hour weeks? You start whatever venture you're working on. I know there's multiple. You're working 100-hour weeks to get it up and running. I mean, is that fair? Is
Sundays, I
that
mean,
realistic?
I tell you what, like I don't even keep track. Like I can't even count the hours because it's just like all the time. It's just my entire life. And like if I want to do something, like I like deliberately like put my phone away. Like if I want to go play golf, that's one of the only times that I just like put my phone away and don't look at it for 4 hours. And by the time I'm done, I have a million Slack messages and like so it's just nonstop.
It, is there like a simple way to articulate it to maybe somebody that doesn't really understand? They're in college or they're just an employee at a
Yeah.
company. Like everything that's coming at you as the CEO. Like I don't
Yeah.
know if you can
So
simply articulate that.
So when you work at a company, let's say you graduate from college and you go work at Colgate Palmolive. I don't know. That's where my dad and my brother worked. So just Colgate Palmolive, right? And your job is marketing, or your job is I'm the head of the new toothbrush division, or whatever, right? there's people there's so many people that work at that company, right? So you don't have to worry about legal, you don't have to worry about getting paid on time, like literally like payroll, right? You don't have to worry about the permit to sell the toothbrush, you don't have to worry about taxes, you don't have to worry about the chair that you sit in, you don't have to worry about the desk that you work at, right? Like there's so many people that kind of take care of everything except the one thing that you need to do, right? And in startups, you need to do everything. There's nobody to do anything for you, right? So your job goes from it is only this thing to now my job is everything. And that's when people get hit with like an incredible amount of stuff that they're just like not prepared to deal with, and it's so easy for all those things to just take up your whole week, right? And you feel like you worked all day because you had to buy a chair and you had to set up Carta and you had to but at the end of the week, like what progress have you made towards building your company? And the answer is zero. Like you haven't gotten new customers, you haven't made your product better, you've just done all this bullshit that other people used to do for you. I think that's like a lot of people underestimate that. And there's more and more like a playbook now for this kind of thing. So there's a lot of vendors that like take a lot of the work out of doing some of these things, and I think like being really smart about that is really important these days, like because the difference between doing all that stuff yourself and like being efficient about finding people to do it for you and getting it out of the way early is huge.
So when you left banking to kind of enter the entrepreneurial space, did you understand that you were going to take on that burden, or did it come as a surprise to you as well?
Zero. Like absolutely not. I just kind of naively thought, I work really hard. Like I can start my first startup was like a gaming social media site. So think like TikTok for your gaming videos.
Hmm.
This was like way before TikTok and before you could like take your Instagram videos and like put like memes and stuff on them and music. Like we did that before you could do it elsewhere. And I was like, that's a really cool idea. And so I was like, I'm going to build that. And so I thought I would spend all day kind of like working with product managers and like doing fun stuff. And it's like so much more than that. And I wasn't ready at all.
So why did you keep going, right? I think, it's been, maybe you can articulate how many years, but I know you've been running Datawisp for almost 3 years and then multiple
Mhm.
companies before that. So why have you kept going if there's just so much responsibility and it seems like it just consumes your whole life?
I think that's a really good question, and I think people who work in startups just like love punishment. There's like I think part of it is like a stubbornness, like that you have to have. Like you just have to think, like it doesn't matter how difficult this is. Like my idea needs to exist, and I need to be the one that builds it, because otherwise, like it doesn't happen. So the two kind of go hand in hand. It's like, it's not like, why am I sticking around? It's like the type of person who is that way is the type of person who ends up being successful in this regard for that reason.
Can you kind of unpack though too? Because it sounds like you've had different businesses. Like Datawisp seems
Yeah,
like it's much more of a bigger opportunity vehicle, more of a burden, more responsibility versus starting a social media brand for esports and just
yeah.
posting online, right? And so I think
No, no, no.
too if
So,
it
so just to clarify, it wasn't a social media brand. So we
okay.
actually built like we built like a platform. We had, it was basically like imagine like a Facebook newsfeed type thing, but we actually had this like built-in video editor. So like you would upload your video, and then like right in your browser you could like, customize your
Mm.
videos and stuff. So it was actually a lot of like tech that went into it, to like making everything happen.
It was
We
kind
had
of
our own platform.
like CapCut before CapCut was a thing, or like
I don't actually know what CapCut is.
it's just like TikTok's a video editor. That's just an app on your
Yeah, yeah,
phone.
yeah.
Hey,
So I guess
edit
something
videos on
like
your
that.
phone.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. No, no, no. I think
yeah.
that's cool. I guess what I'm getting at too, though, is like what you're building, right? It seems like you're taking on these bigger projects, right? Building a product, software
Yeah,
versus I think there's this push now, right? Because it's become so easy, or the cost of failure is so low to try to be a solopreneur, or, have a brand online where you just post social media and you have brand deals and affiliates. And technically
yeah.
that person is an entrepreneur as well, but I think it's much different than what you're trying to do. So like I guess a message for anyone out there that's kind of exploring this, like what is the difference between those two things, and why have you selected to try and build something big and sell a complex product to enterprise customers versus maybe an easier route that has less upside but would provide with more flexibility in work-life balance?
I guess it depends. I guess it depends what your goals in life are, and not to say that like one is better than the other, right? But it depends like what you value, what your goals are. If you're someone who, for example, spent a lot of time working in banking, right? Like you have a you have a certain like level that you set for yourself. The alternative to doing a startup is to continue working in banking and get paid pretty well, right? So like the opportunity cost factors into it. So if I wasn't doing this, I'd be working in banking, making a certain amount. So this really has to, like, I have to build something really big to make it worth, you know. Conversely, depends, depending on what you were doing before. If let's say you were working in banking still, but you go, hey man, I really hate working this many hours, but I still want to get paid, you know, you might decide to build one of those businesses that you were mentioning, which maybe isn't like venture scalable, but like you could still make a lot of money doing some of those things, right? And probably spend fewer hours than you would if you were in banking. So it really depends like what you want. Like what I wanted is to build something humongous. I wanted to build something huge that would change how business is done, right? So that's why we said, okay, we're gonna build Datawisp, and my co-founders share the same vision, right? So uh, basically, every single business on every single decision is guessing most of the time. They don't know. They're just saying, let's do it this way, and we'll see what happens, right? And we think there's an opportunity for all those decisions to be not driven by data, but informed by data, in a way that's just currently not done. And so when we think of who can use this, it's basically any company. And when we think of what role can use this, is basically any role, right? And so that's a size of business that we want to build.
And so does it come down to impact, right? Like when you think about it, right? Because you could say, okay, I'm going to be a data analytics YouTuber and teach people about data analytics on YouTube, but that doesn't
Yeah,
provide the impact that Datawisp is providing. And I don't know if you've kind of like quantified it, right? Like of what you're trying to do, if going back to Colgate Palmolive, right, they can make better decisions, they can then make more money, which provides better salaries for their employees. Is that like how you're thinking about it? Or is there
Just
another way that you think about it as the CEO?
just economic growth, like resulting from doing everything better and more efficiently, right? Like so, like the living standard of everyone, right, is kind of like dependent on how efficient we are at running our economy. If it costs us twice as much to make the same road for no other benefit, right? Like we are worse off as a society than if we can make the same road for half the cost. Because that means that there's money left over to spend on education and like other roads and like a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So in general, um, my hope is that through more data informed decision making and everything, we can run companies more efficiently. We can create more like economic value. We can employ more people. We can pay them higher salaries and stuff because we're doing everything more efficiently. We can increase the standard of living. We can decrease the technical barriers to people being able to do certain jobs. So now, if you want to be a data analyst or someone who helps companies like manage their data and make smart decisions, like you need a certain like technical skill set. If we can eliminate the technical need and just have like smart people who can think about these things in a clever way but don't necessarily know how to write SQL, right? If we can get those people involved, that's a new opportunity for them that didn't exist before.
Yeah, can we maybe unpack the problem that you're solving too a bit? Like, I'd love for you to go into detail because I kind of understand it, right? Like, I work for a smaller health
Yeah.
insurance company, right? And I'm customer facing sales side, and I know that for me, data is such a pain point. Or you have to go to the one person at the company that understands how the data warehouse is set up and articulate what you need. And he already has 10 requests on his plate. He says, "Oh yeah, I can do that for you, but it's going to be a couple months." And then you go, "Okay,
Yeah.
great, I need it now." And so to your point, I am making kind of blind decisions that are a waste of time, maybe essentially, or are costing the company money as opposed to making the company money.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a way that you at Datawisp kind of articulate that to non-technical people, like, hey, you don't realize what you're doing here, but you're really missing out on big opportunities.
So there's not like a data wisp way of articulating this, but I can give you a pretty simple example, right? So like my parents love watching America's Got Talent, and every now and then they're like, so they come on to the show. Before they perform, there's like an interview, right? They ask them a bunch of questions. Where are you from? Why did you decide you wanted to juggle scissors or whatever? And then they get into their thing, right? Every now and then you get an act that's not from America, or like you get people that are like from Vietnam or wherever, and they don't speak English, and they have a translator, right? And so these are incredibly talented people and they're able to do amazing things, but they're not able to express themselves in English, so they have to go through a translator. And so the interview becomes so shitty because it's basically like, where are you from? Where are you from? I'm from Vietnam. I'm from Vietnam. Blah, blah, blah. And so everything takes twice as long. And the quality of the interview is degraded because they start asking simpler questions because now it has to go through all this layers of translation and stuff. So you just end up with a worse interview simply because someone didn't have like a technical skill. So we look at it similarly. So if someone is really smart and has good ideas about the business and everything, but doesn't know SQL, they now have to interface with all that data through a person. So now they have to go to a data scientist and they say, hey, can you do this for me? And they do the thing and then they get back to them. And so it's like playing telephone. There's so much stuff that's lost versus just being able to do it yourself. You end up with a slower, shittier process with, less like it's less actionable and less efficient in the end.
So, how much like upskilling is needed to use a platform like Datawisp? Like, I know that's a big thing with AI, right? So everyone can go into Chat GPT and ask it basic prompts, but there are some people that truly know how to utilize the prompts to the best advantage, like a true
Yeah.
expert at writing the prompts for ChatGPT. So, like, is that the big gap in being able to kind of eliminate that middleman or optimize that process? And what does that take from your perspective for somebody to kind of interact and be an expert at getting what they need from your tool or similar tools?
So we try to eliminate that. So our goal when we created Wispy, which is our agent, is that you shouldn't need to be an expert at talking to Wispy. You should just be able to ask the question how you would normally ask it and get the answer that you want. So essentially, we don't need people to learn prompt engineering. We, as a company, should excel at that stuff and let them just ask the question how they normally would. If there is like, if someone can be better or worse at Datawisp, that's like, that means we're not doing our job as well as we should be. Because ultimately we want our goal is for Wispy to be something that you interact with as you would a regular human data scientist.
And do you kind of hold that same belief for like all of this AI, generative AI tech that's coming out? Like it needs to be used by your parents or grandparents, and if you
It
can't, then it's not as useful as we think it is.
it depends what problem they're trying to solve. So like some Gen AI use cases aren't necessarily trying to cater to super non-technical people like we are. They just there's um there's like programming copilots, right? And so they generate what they return is code, right? And so if you can't read code, you can't use that. So like my mom wouldn't be able to like just become a software developer all of a sudden, right? Because she has an AI copilot. Sorry. But for us, the goal was to kind of put data analytics in reach of non-technical people. So for us, the interaction with the AI has to be such that if you don't have a certain set of skills, you can still use it. There's incredibly, I mean, I've just been to a bunch of like Gen AI conferences and stuff out in San Francisco. There's some like incredibly complex applications of Gen AI that are like way over my head. So
Yeah. How does that like, or what is your perspective considering you're kind of in the thick of it, is like where this is all headed, right? Like the Gen AI stuff, or, and maybe you could speak to it first, like from a data wisp perspective, right?
yeah.
From my like limited view, it sounds like, okay, is there even a need for a data scientist, or is this simply, the end user interacting with your platform with the raw data behind it, getting everything they need from it, and that's kind of the future? Or is it more nuanced than that?
So we just had an event at New York Tech Week last week, and it was called "Can AI Replace Your Data Scientist?" And essentially, we did a panel with 3 data scientists, and we asked them a bunch of questions about how they're using AI and stuff. And it was a bit of a like clickbaity title. We wanted people to come to our event, but you know, when we actually sit down and have conversation with these guys, it's clear that like AI is, at least not for now, who knows what the future holds, but for now, data scientists are still very much needed. And what the AI is doing is it's just improving the efficiency, because the AI is really good at doing certain things very quickly that it would take a human to do. It would take them more time to be able to do that same task, right? So if you can find the things the AI is really good at, you can enable the humans to work on other things that are maybe more value add or whatever, right? So the conclusion among all the data scientists was generally there are certain things, certain parts of our job that are incredibly tedious, and we would love to just be able to automate them so that we can, improve the value elsewhere. And that's kind of, when you think about what Datawisp does, a big part of a lot of data scientists' job is answering, simple business questions, about the data. And so if you can build a platform like Datawisp that can allow people to self-serve, some of these answers, you free up a lot of time for data scientists to build more complex models and things like that.
So have you kind of thought about, okay, that's how it exists now, right? And I think to your point,
Mhm.
it's a great tool for efficiency, but and it may be even hard. Like maybe even you can't really articulate what it will be like in 10 years from now, 5 to 10 years from now, because it just seems like is progressing so rapidly. Like, how
Yeah.
are you thinking about that as the CEO, as you move forward and continue to try and build and run a successful company?
The rate of change is so fast in the technology. It's really hard to predict like where the tech will be, but keep in mind that like most businesses aren't adopting this stuff as soon as it comes out, and most businesses are, there's still companies that don't have their data in the cloud yet, even like so one thing, it's one thing to see something really cool at OpenAI's developer day. It's another thing for like all of industry to like adopt these things and make them mainstream and stuff. So while we might have amazing AI in even 2-3 years, it's going to take some time for companies to adopt all this stuff. um, so for us, it's just try to stay, on top of all the trends and stuff and build the best product that we can and sell to as many people as possible. And then eventually, when, all work is done by robots or by AI, be as best positioned as we can.
So are you generally optimistic or pessimistic as this like progresses, right? Because I think, in these are kind of sweeping generalizations, right? There's to your point, like robots running everything, elimination of jobs,
Yeah.
but on the other side, it's an increase in efficiency. And I've talked about this on other episodes, right? Like maybe you can get into like what your biggest expense is, but I bet you it's labor, right? So if you can reduce labor, that therefore allows you to offer your product at a lower cost and still have margins. And so if somehow this tech allows us to be more efficient and produce everything at a lower cost, it seems like
Yeah.
that solves a lot of our problems as well. So I don't know if you're overall optimistic or pessimistic, as because we're just in such uncharted territory, right?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. There's like so many possibilities, and like you said, it's like accelerating so fast that like, by next year we, all jobs could be eliminated, or, we could all be doing exactly the same thing we're doing now. Like it's just really hard to predict. Um I think obviously a lot of things will get automated. There's a lot of things that like really obviously are getting automated already, right? So like um big law firms are already using AI to like go through documents and stuff in the fraction of the time that they were. Outbound marketing on LinkedIn and stuff is already automated by AI to an extent. So AI is already starting to you know, get into some of these things, but what you notice is there's still like quality concerns, right? So when I get an AI written LinkedIn connection, right, it's like really obvious. And so we're not at that point yet. So we're just still working.
Yeah. And what about when it becomes not obvious and you're like, okay, I didn't
Well,
even.
so it's tough because I'll tell you, like AI's there's a really cool music, like AI music generation app, right? And like the AI gets certain, I forgot what it's called. I think it's called like Suno or something. Where you can create basically just with a prompt, you can create a song with lyrics and like a fake voice and instruments and everything, right? And so you can make stuff, and like the AI is so good at picking up certain like things. Like I listen to a lot of like heavy metal and stuff, and like the AI is really good at like writing fake heavy metal guitar riffs, right? And it's really good at like writing drums that just sound like those drums are exactly like what someone might play in a song like that, but it's just like shitty. Like it doesn't know how to make like a good melody. So it's all kind of sounds like generic, like heavy metal, but it's not good. So you think like, what is it to be human and to have creativity, and can the AI really ever do that? This is an example of where like it clearly falls short still. But who knows? Maybe in a few years it'll replace us all. So.
I mean, do you actually believe that, or do you believe that there's like something inherently that it can't replace that a person can do?
So I think the way that AI works now, like it essentially trains off of stuff, and that stuff is created by humans, like, who have creativity, and everything that the AI creates is just some sort of like amalgamation of like things it knows about already. It's not like the AI is not really creative. So that's what I'm saying. Is like when the AI generates like heavy metal or country or whatever, it just kind of like goes, what are some country songs I've heard? And then so I heard an AI generated country song and it just sounded like Luke Bryan. And it was just really funny because like it's basically like as generic country as you can make, but it's not creative in any way, right? It's just exactly what you would expect a country song to sound like.
Well, can I just ask you a question too, kind of about
Yeah,
like, I don't know if this is a fair comparison, right? The iPhone comes out and it changes everything, right? But if
yeah.
you really go back to the first iPhone to iPhones today, have they really changed all that much, right? Okay, it's
Mm.
still accesses the internet, apps, phone calls, messages. I mean, to a certain extent, I would consider it the same product, and then Apple just continues to drop iterations. Like, okay, new
To
iPhone,
make it
it's
better, yeah.
faster, yeah, faster, better camera, etc. Is that all AI is as well? I mean, to your point, like it's just it has the data that's available to it. It's better at, searching through the data, making conclusions from the data, but to your point, it can't think and create on its own. Like, is that
I
something that just
think
can't
it
be overcome?
I think the efficiency that it like it does it at, you're right. The AI, especially, and I don't want to talk about all AI. I want to talk about like Gen AI because that's what's
Okay.
in vogue now. Gen AI is good at doing things that humans are good at, but just like way more efficiently. So like it can write a novel in 2 seconds or whatever, but it's like still just like doing stuff that like humans can do. And but so I understand your point, but I think the efficiency and like the speed at which it can do some of these things is so much better that it unlocks new opportunities, right? Like, so when you do something in 80% of the time, you don't really change anything. But when you can do something in 0.5% of the time, right, then you change the game because now you've just freed up so many people to work on other things, right? So I
Yeah.
think there's like huge efficiency gains like allowed by this technology.
So it
Um,
almost creates efficiency, and then it frees up people to have who have that ingenuity or that
yeah.
the imagination to progress further, right? Because I think it's a really good point. Like, you probably think about it from your employees, or like how much are they bogged down by just like inefficient processes where it's like you you're doing data entry for 8 hours a day. If that could be replaced and automated, then it frees you up to solve bigger problems. Is that kind of how you look at it?
Well, so I can tell you right now, like if at Datawisp, if we didn't have to worry about payroll or taxes, or legal or our website running or like any of these like tasks, right? If that could just be automated, um, there would be a lot more room for creativity in making the product better and solving problems for our clients, right? So this is in a way kind of how that works with AI.
And so, what do you say to the people that say, "Okay, well, I went to law school or I've dedicated my whole life to this," and you're basically telling me, I mean, maybe it's not there yet, but in 5 years that they're no longer needed, right? Like that's just a really hard transition for people, right? When they say, "Hey, this is me, this is my job," and now it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, how can maybe just generally, maybe at Datawisp and at large, we deal with like that type of problem? Or,
Well,
hey,
I mean, think
I'm a
of
taxi driver. I'm a bus driver. Now the bus drives itself. What am I supposed to do? I don't have any other skills. Yeah, I don't know.
so I think I mean, there's historically been many jobs that have been, replaced in that fashion. If you think of technologies that have come out throughout the years, um, I think for the lawyer, for example, right, a big part of a lawyer's job is like there's a case and I need to look for a bunch of like decisions that set precedent for this case, right? And now I can just get AI to do that for me. And so instead of spending hours like digging in the archives for this stuff, I can just have it immediately, and we can focus on crafting a better argument as to why these cases are more relevant and these cases are less relevant. Like I think it's really easy to look at this technology and think that it eliminates jobs, because like it takes creativity to think of the next thing that we'll do when when the AI like eliminates the thing that we're doing now, right? That's obvious, but the next thing takes kind of like a bit of creativity to think about and stuff. But I think over time, like humans have proved that with every major change in technology, we've been able to keep ourselves employed. That hasn't really been an issue.
Well, and this is kind of like an off the wall question, but I mean, as the CEO, what is your take on? Well, you obviously have mentioned earlier you're grinding all day, every day, and you're kind of in that
Yeah.
startup culture. But I think kind of what we're talking about says, okay, well, if a lot of efficiencies are going to be gained through advances in technology, what does that say about the traditional 5 day work week, 9 to 5? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you think about that from your employee's perspective? Or to your point, if you're no longer doing menial tasks for half of your week, does that mean, okay, maybe you can get away with working 25 hours and still having the same output? Or will we always have the in the direction of saying, hey, you need to work more? Okay, so what? You've replaced your efficiency. You're still working 50, 60 hours a week. You're just doing something else.
I think it depends. I think and I think it depends on what every person wants. I could work a 2 day work week right now if I wanted. It depends what my goals are, right? So so given the if you create technology that makes it so what we could achieve in 5 days, we can now do in 3 days, there's going to be people that say, great, 2 more days of vacation. And there's going to be people that say, great, I have time to work on more stuff. And I think that's just like people are different. And the nice thing about this technology is it allows for both.
Yeah. Or do you say, okay, the people that, and this is probably true today anyways, but the people that put their foot off the gas are just going to be, their lunch is
Left
going to be
behind.
eaten by, yeah, yeah, left behind by,
I mean, that's capitalism for you. Like
yeah, yeah.
that's just how it is. Like, if I work 3 days a week because my life is easy or whatever, like, the guy who works 7 days a week is going to build a better product. And they're gonna, and they're gonna eat my lunch.
But okay, let's just, like, if you think about what you need as a person, right? Okay,
Yeah,
you have a home, you work only the 3 days a week as opposed to the five. You're still bringing in a decent income. You can eat whatever you want. You can go wherever you want. Like what is the need to really work more? And maybe that's something that you kind of
that's
talked
a
about
very
earlier.
that's
Maybe you can art.
philosophy. That's
Yeah,
philosophy, man. So like,
yeah.
cool. You have a Lamborghini. Why do you need two Lamborghinis? Why do you need three Lamborghinis? Why does Jeff Bezos need another dime in his life ever? He wants to keep working. He wants to keep making that money. There's just like, there's always more. There's always more that you can do. And like, those are the types of people that build those companies. So kind of like circling back to what we were talking about at the beginning, a guy who's happy with his small house and his SUV and his whatever, cool. If that's all he needs in his life, good for him. But there's a guy out there, who could own the entire planet and he'd still want more, and his name is Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So maybe if you're willing to talk about it from your perspective, like, so
Yeah,
why do you need more, right? I'm assuming that
yeah,
you're at a place where you just mentioned it. You could just work a 2 hour day or a two
yeah,
day work week. So what is it that drives it? Maybe like from a personal standpoint for you, philosophically, I don't know how you think about it. Like, so
yeah.
why do you need more? Why do you need to build this into, I don't know what your goals is. Maybe you can articulate it to, a 9 figure business or a billion
Yep.
dollar business. I don't know what your goals are, but why?
Because there's a lot of stuff that I want to do, and this kind of opens up a lot of doors. Like, there's a difference between building a nice lifestyle business that keeps you, afloat and lets you go on a cool vacation every now and then, and play golf on the weekend with the homies. And there's a difference between that and building a 9 figure business that it gives you like FU money. Like, you can go do whatever you want to do after that, right? So if I wanted to go start a nonprofit to tackle a certain cause that I was really passionate about, I can't do that now, or at least my impact now is very limited because cool, I donated, $10,000 to whatever, that's nothing. That doesn't do anything. But if you build a 9 figure business and then you go, okay, I'm going to create this foundation that increases, we pay for everyone's education in the state of New York for free, right? Like
Mm.
that has the opportunity to impact so many people. Um, and you can't do that like unless you hit this sort of like massive success. Like you don't have impact on the world. Think of all the people that like kind of control everything around you. Think of you think of like in this country at least, politicians elected by people, but they still kind of like there's people that like make those donations that like buy those politicians to do the things they want. Like until you reach their level, like the things you do don't matter, right? And if you want to have that kind of influence and you want to be able to change society, you need that kind of money.
Would you say, you mentioned Jeff Bezos, that
Yeah.
he has that same framework or mindset as you do? Like, does he truly believe like, okay, I'm driving the change that I want to see in the world forward, and I'm making it a better place? Like,
I don't know what the change is that Jeff Bezos wants to see in the world,
well,
but I'll tell you what, he definitely has that influence. So when he deciding where he wants to put his new building, states like bow to him. They go, come here, we'll give you all these tax breaks, we'll do all these things. Like he makes people do what he wants because he wields
well,
that kind of influence.
yeah, and I think you've articulated well. I think that's what a lot of people that are in your shoes, or like people that are farther along, want to do. But, and again, this is kind of broad, philosophical, but it seems like there's already so many people that have already done that, right? Like, okay, there's so many billionaires in America. There's so
Hmm.
much money, but yet so many problems persist, right? So, have you thought about that as someone that's trying to build something big, like as why that still exists, or are we just not at a point where we can solve a lot of the bigger issues?
I think many, maybe people start out like me, like, naive and with ambitions to change the world. And then, as they grow and build these humongous businesses, they kind of like lose focus of that. Um, but there's still like, I think a lot of potential for the right people who care about the right things to be able to change the world in that way. I like education is something I'm really, really passionate about. I think like things like property tax funding schools is like ridiculous because like there's no better way to keep, poor uneducated people poor and uneducated than by basing funding for schools off the value of the places where they live. Like so like there's like things that I want to do and like problems I want to solve, and like you can't get there besides, building a huge, very influential business.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. So maybe if you're willing to talk about it, or like your vision for education, or maybe your take on the current education system. We've been talking a lot about
Oh
the
man,
progress of.
this is like
So,
so. Yeah, I had a lot of the stuff that I see, in terms of like conflict, and I don't want to get too political, but like oftentimes I'll see people debating two sides of an argument on social media or in the news or whatever, and there's just no sort of education, there, or there's like really simple things that, if somebody knew, like they wouldn't be going. Like Occupy Wall Street was right outside of my apartment downtown, right? And so every day to get into my apartment, like I'd have to walk by the protests, right? And I worked in finance, so I wore a suit and stuff, and people yelled all sorts of things at me as I was walking by, and I stopped and I talked to them. And and there was one guy who just holding us a pizza box with, in Sharpie it just said ban derivatives on it, and I'm like what do you know about derivatives? Guy with the pizza box at the Occupy, like what do you know that farmers like use these things to protect themselves from, when there's bad weather and they don't have any crops that year? Like do you know this? Like there's just so many conflicts or whatever that would just be solved by like people being more educated. And that's like a maybe, I'm not trying to get like derivatives taught in school, but that's just the one example that stood out to me because this person was just so ignorant, but they were clearly hurting, economically or whatever, and they just needed to express themselves in that moment, but like what they were saying was nonsense.
So do you think that generally the public school system as a whole kind of fails in achieving that mean, or is it just kind of an outdated system? I mean, when I think about it, right, underpaid teachers that went and got a degree from some college and then they teach the same thing over and over again that they've taught for years. I mean, doesn't it need to be adapted, or how can we
Teachers
implement?
are pros, man. If you know people that are teachers, like I went to college with a bunch of people that ended up being, becoming teachers, and I just like still follow them. I'm not super close with, most of them, but I have a few friends that I'm still close with, and I see like the stuff they're posting, the stuff they're talking about, and stuff. Teachers are superheroes. Like a lot of them, like out of their own money, like buy supplies for their classroom and stuff because like they don't have pens, just basic stuff in schools. And that's like there is so many issues with like funding for after school programs and stuff, and if parents have to, if parents have to work multiple jobs and they can't be home, and there's, there should be like programs for these kids to be in, to instead of just like sitting on the street waiting for their parents to come home. Like there's just like so much opportunity to do better than what we do now.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not an easy problem to solve. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but like we can do better.
So have you thought about how technology can kind of be integrated, right? I think you mentioned, okay, teachers are way underpaid. And I don't know statistics on it, but I would imagine that because of that, fewer people are going into teaching. Or I
Yeah,
know personally, like family friends, oh, I want to be a teacher. I tried. I wasn't being paid enough. I could make more, you know,
doing
nannying full
literally anything.
time. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so I'm
driving
not doing
Uber,
it right.
like
Yeah, yeah. And isn't that, I mean, that, I feel like that's only going to be exacerbated in the near future,
yeah.
right? So I don't know if you thought maybe, and I get it, it's really complex, but maybe there's got to be a way to integrate technology to, again, like kind of employ some efficiency into the system.
Well, I think access to, so like in terms of education, it's not just like reforming schools and stuff, but it's just making like when you look at the presidential debates, for example, right? Like each side quotes like stats and stuff. And they say, well, every Republican president has decreased the budget, or every Democratic whatever, right? A bunch of bullshit. Thing is, like, you can go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can go to their website. You can get all the data. You can look at it yourself. This is like freely available. And people don't know how to do that. People are so reliant on just like being told stuff, right? And the kind of like, when you have people who are like pushing an agenda and then using like to make this relevant to what we do, like using data like as a weapon, basically, right? If you don't have the ability to go look at that stuff yourself and make your own conclusion, like all you can do is just believe the candidate in the colors that you like, right? But if you have the ability to just, hey, download a CSV from the website, pop it into Datawisp, and mess around with it a bit and go, this guy's a liar, you know, that changes things. Now people can get called out for their bullshit, and now you're no longer reliant on someone kind of spoon feeding you like their narrative, and you can make your own decisions. You can pick the candidate that you think will do better for you.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, and I like how you tied it back, right? Or
Yeah,
this advancement in technology. That's one example, but it kind of returns the power to you as the consumer, the citizen, the voter, student, whatever it is, right? So I think that's a good
it's
point.
kind of it's like when Google came out, right? Like, do you remember like when we were kids, you had an argument with someone, you would just argue like children. You would just be like, no, Superman is stronger than Batman, like, and then you would just argue about it. And then when Google came out and people got smartphones, like that ended. Like there was no more of that, because anytime someone said something, you'd be like, you're wrong, and then you'd be like, here, and that was it. That was the end of it, right? And like, so now with some of the technology that's coming up and like what it's empowering people to do, like we could have like a brand new version of that, like powered by AI. Of course, there's still like hallucinations and stuff, but like, being able to, building AI agents that can retrieve specific, pieces of information from documents based on a prompt in like 2 seconds. Those exist already, and they're super effective at this.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point. I think crazy times we're going to live in right over the next 5-10 years. To kind of close this out though, right, so we've talked about it a bit. You want to build something big. You've
Mhm.
been running Datawisp for almost 3 years now. Are you where you thought you would be 3 years down the line, or are you farther along, not as far as long, and kind of what's driven that, or what unforeseen roadblocks, obstacles have you had to overcome to get where you are?
I think our tech is a lot cooler than I thought it would be, because when we started this, we didn't. When we first started this, we wanted to make data as easy as possible to mess around with for non-technical folks, and we initially built out this like graphic interface with like point and click and stuff, and it wasn't, just type a question and then get an answer. But then eventually we ended up adding the AI element to it, and what the AI did is it took that interface that we had and would just do it for you essentially. So not only would you be able to ask AI a question, but you'd also be able to understand exactly what the AI did, because we have this user interface that we built that kind of takes all the SQL out of it. So in a funny way, like, our tech is way cooler than I ever thought it would be when we started out building this. There have been some challenges for sure, because when we first started building this, kind of our user interface with the clicking and dragging and stuff was easy to use, and now, at post chat GPT, nothing is easy to use anymore unless it's like type a question, get an answer, right? That's kind of what people are used to now. So we did have to take like a big detour product wise to like add those kinds of features and stuff, because evidently in post chat GPT nobody wanted to use the old interface by itself anymore. um, so that kind of created a lot of additional work for us that slowed us down a bit. So we launched Wispy, our agent, in January. I would have liked to be live with a product, way earlier than that, just given how long we've been working on Datawisp. But it's going pretty well so far since the launch. So
And then you've talked about earlier in the conversation, okay, that 9-figure company or whatever it is, a really big company. So what is the biggest hurdle to that scale, right? I've interviewed other people, or you read online, like the biggest thing as a
yeah.
CEO, right, is hiring the right people, putting the right team in
Hmm.
place, or is it
Yeah.
product? Like, what are you looking at as CEO as like, hey, these are the biggest problems I need to solve through the end of the year to really start pushing this thing in the right direction for, big growth.
So I think there's a few things. One, making sure you have the right people, always super important, because like, especially in technology, there's very little defensibility of technology these days. It's just your team's ability to execute and how good your team is. Right. So you always want to be able to hire the best people. You always want to make sure that not just the smartest and the most creative people, but like I mentioned at the beginning, people who can execute. Right. Execution is very important. So that, and then the other thing is just making sure that we are not reinventing the wheel. So there's a lot of lessons to, both startups that have done really well and startups that have failed miserably, that we can learn from, that we don't need to trial and error everything. And so when it comes to things like enterprise BI sales, right? There's like a million people that have done this before, that have experience that we don't, that we can leverage. I just spoke to someone yesterday that used to work at a company that did something similar to Datawisp but without AI, and we poked her brain for an hour about like messaging and stuff and onboarding new clients and everything. That that saves us a lot of time, kind of like relearning these things from scratch.
Yeah.
So
No, I think I think a lot of good points. And just my last question to close us out here is just like, knowing
yep.
everything you know now, all your experience, college, banking, entrepreneurial, what advice would you give your younger self?
Study computer science. I was going into school, I was 50-50 between becoming like a software engineer and like going to work in banking. And I think I got like exactly like 2 days of like good banking. So banking was just like extremely desirable for like a few years into like when I was graduating. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna do that. And then 2 days into the job, I was like, I regret this immediately because we had a massive financial crisis. So the other thing is obviously like the experience that I gained is nice. The ability to just build something is so valuable. Like so many times I go to meetups and like startup events and stuff, and I just meet like people with ideas who are just like, yeah, I'm looking for a CTO to start this company with me, and because they can't build it. So
Yeah.
just being able to build stuff, being able to just do the thing that you have in your head is so valuable.
Right. And I think I've experienced this too, like even like starting a podcast on YouTube. If you have to rely on others to edit, post things, something happens in their life, that person's not there anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
Now everything just falls off a cliff, right? If you're more self reliant. But I guess just
Yep.
to tie it back to what you're saying though, you're kind of at a point, or if you want to grow something big, you have to rely on other people. You can't do it all. So I think there's that
Yep.
balance of as a founder building it to start and then stepping back when appropriate, right?
Yep. For
All
sure. Yeah,
right.
and I've got two amazing technical co-founders that, you know, do a lot of
Yeah,
the amazing work here at Datawisp. So I'm grateful for them.
very nice. Well, Mo, hey, I want to thank you for taking the time to be on. I thought it was a great conversation, super interesting, learned a lot. I'll give the floor to you to close out. Any final thoughts? Where can people find you in Datawisp?
Sure thing. So thanks for having me. Enjoyed being here. It got pretty philosophical, but it's nice to think about the reasons that we do all these things in the first place. If you want to follow me, you can do so on Twitter X at just electronic mo, and on LinkedIn, just find me by my name. And then the company is Datawisp, and we're Datawisp on Twitter and on LinkedIn as well. So you can follow us there.
All right. Thanks, Mo. Again, appreciate it and best of luck.
Thanks, Connor. Take it easy.